Why was the Homeowner Bill of Rights necessary?
Well, the history here in California and nationwide over the last decade has been that many of the banks engaged, and mortgage companies engaged in scrupulous practices which were really of a great detriment to many, many homeowners. The Attorney General in the state of California, Kamala Harris, did a review of the activities that were going on by these banks and mortgage institutions. And it was her agency, the Office of the Attorney General, who suggested a package of activities that could be undertaken through a new law. And so last June, the California State Legislature adopted the Homeowners Bill of Rights. That law was signed by the governor and became effective on January 1st of this year.
So it's a very new law.
Brand new law.
So, Dwayne, in terms of the county, do you see, before we get into some of the details about the law, that it might have any usefulness?
It's going to have major utility. It's focused, it's called the Homeowners Bill of Rights, and there's a lot of provisions in there that are directly address things that have been just real issues, real problem for homeowners. What's less known about the bill is that there are also some very strong, very useful tenants' right protections in the bill as well, and those are worth noting.
Okay. So, Assemblyman Gordon, let's start looking at the bill. It's my understanding that it contains a series of laws. Is there any particular law that you think is most important?
Well, I think there's a couple. First of all, it had been practice by many of these institutions to advise someone that they could essentially refinance, but they would get the notice that they could repackage their loan. At the same time, they would get the foreclosure notice. And both would be going in parallel. But what we discovered was happening was, even though they were in parallel, more times than not, the foreclosure activity trumped or preceded any opportunity to do a refinance or to kind of repackage your loan. Under the Homeowners Bill of Rights, there is essentially, if someone proceeds with the financial institution to start the process of looking at refinancing, changing or repackaging their loan, the foreclosure process stops until they have the right to see whether or not they can get that refinancing. That's a huge impact to help people stay in their home. Also, under the bill and the law that is now in effect, the financial institution must provide a single point of contact for the homeowner to deal with. One of the complaints we'd heard from many homeowners was that they would walk into the bank, start talking to someone about the problem with their mortgage, and that person would walk away, someone else would come, or when they came back the next week to follow up on the activity they'd started the week before, that person wasn't there, they had to deal with someone else. Now there must be a single point of contact.
Okay, now, as we talk about each provision in the law or each law separately, please feel free, if you have some questions about it or some observations to make, feel free to make them. And Dwayne, if there's something that we talk about in terms of a provision that you think might be especially helpful in terms of what you're doing.
Just to start the thread on the tenant side as well, probably the one that comes to mind first is that when properties are foreclosed, there's a new owner. And what's happened very frequently is that tenants who live in the property who have known for some time, well, sometimes, they don't even know that there are difficulties the landlord's having and so the day can arrive when somebody shows up and says, hi, I'm the new owner, here's a bunch of official looking papers, and that can result in an eviction.
Now,
so there are
new provisions. Is this an individual house or is it an apartment complex?
In any ownership situation, it can happen. And so some of the provisions in the new law allow at minimum a 90-day period from the time that the foreclosure is complete, that a tenant who's in the occupying the unit has at least 90 days. And sometimes literally they'll find out on the day that the eviction notice arrives in the current situation. So that's, that's a big deal.
Yes, I would think that's very important.
You know, Henrietta, one of the things that I'd like to do very early on is to make sure, because what we're talking about is a complex set of laws that went into effect. And so people who own homes, people who are renting, who may be impacted by foreclosure, should know that there is now a centralized website that they can access to get all of the information they need about the Homeowner's Bill of Rights. And it's pretty simple. It's called keepyourhomecalifornia.org. So keepyourhomecalifornia.org. And maybe I'll repeat that at the end of the show tonight so that everyone knows how to make sure that they can access that.
I can even repeat it now. keepyourhomecalifornia.org. You have an observation.
Yes, good evening. Since Mr. Gordon, you touched on modifications a little bit earlier, there was sort of a common practice that I now heard that the Homeowner's Bill of Rights solidified into law, which was the indemnification of banks for fraud after you do go through a successful modification. Is this true, and at which point in the modification does the indemnification apply?
Joseph, I don't know the specific answer to that question in terms of exactly when that kicks in. I think what is important is to also note that one of the things that occurred in this legislation is that the statute of limitations to prosecute under mortgage fraud has been extended from 1 year to 3 years. So the Attorney General, the District Attorney, has much a greater opportunity to prosecute fraud than existed before because of the extension of the timeline. The other thing that happened under this law is that the Attorney General now has authority essentially to call a statewide grand jury to investigate financial institutions in terms of looking at their practices on a broad scale. So not necessarily looking just at case by case. So there's been some expansion of the ability to prosecute and pursue the institutions. I know there's also been some indemnification of the institutions. I don't know exactly how those timelines match up.
Now, you mentioned an extension of 3 years for prosecution. So let's say someone lost their house in 2009. When does the clock start running?
The clock, so 2009, the clock probably has stopped running because of the 3 years.
So they can't do anything?
No, but if, given now we're in 2013, someone who, anyone from 2010 on would be able to still have some access to a prosecution if they can demonstrate that there's been this kind of fraud.
Okay.